the first time the monitor is run and it's talking to the cloud through VMX, it synchronizes a bunch of data. And because I'm running on a very slow DSL connection, that process takes a few minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and let that continue, and we'll jump back to it in a moment. I'll continue talking about budgeting. So the idea is, I talked earlier about group mappings, where each virtual machine instance is associated to a group. And so you might have different groups for different types of jobs. Simulation might be heavy, so you might choose one CPU type. And that means that you have a different cost. Some virtual machine instances you might want to assign a higher cost based on the base cost of the hardware type that you're using, and also the amount of transfer that it might be doing. And then based on that, you would have a mix of virtual machines running. The region budget says at no time should you have more than this many total budget. So based on your VM cost, you multiply all that out. It will ensure that the budget never exceeds this amount. If I kind of show you an idea of what's happening here, the balancer algorithm, which I talked about earlier, which is customizable, will request a certain number of virtual machines based on the demand and the load. And generally, the algorithm would be, would be aware of the state of the queue and your budget settings, and would take that into account. But as with any development, it's always possible that there's a bug in the algorithm, and that for some reason it might spit out a number that is outrageous and would burn through your budget very quickly. VMX makes sure that no matter what number of virtual machines are requested by the algorithm, that it's capped to the budget limit, and it does so on a demand priority basis, so that it only so that if the algorithm has requested more than the allocation can support, then it will always truncate to within your budget limit. All right, so this brings us back to the Cloud Wizard. The functionality of VMX enables you to configure and talk to pretty much any cloud solution, but if you're new to the cloud, there's a little bit of a learning curve with respect to understanding various aspects of the account. How do you create cloud storage? How do you set up a VPN? How do you create new virtual machine instances? And how do you configure those? And because of that, it's a little bit of a entry barrier for a lot of folks. So the idea behind the Cloud Wizard was that we do all that. We take all that work and condense it down and get it done typically in about 30 minutes. And that would allow you to get past the initial barrier and understand how Deadline works with the cloud. And then on your own time, you can, learn the various concepts, and you can look to what we've done with the Cloud Wizard in terms of setting up this cloud-based farm, and then decide whether, how you want to change it. So essentially what the wizard does, which I showed you earlier as we were going through the UI, is it installs a VPN client to securely connect to your cloud account and talk to the render farm. It sets up some cloud storage to hold the repository and project files, installs a temporary Deadline and VMX licensing, installs a fully functional repository and database, so it's a complete working farm essentially, and we download some example virtual machine images that spawn the slave instances, and we pre-populate the queue with some example jobs so that you can actually mess around with it right out of the box. And the let's see if the monitor is done synchronizing. I will switch back here. Yes, it is. So the monitor is done synchronizing and has in fact already completed one job. It spawned up the balancer. I'm going to switch over to the balancer. This is the balancer, and we can see that actually it's probably showing a current 20 because over a budget of 10. What's happened there is that we had two different virtual image types, one for the Maya job and one for the Blender job. And so because there was 10 tasks here, it immediately spawned 10, which would have been the budget for the Maya job. And then as it switched over to the Blender job, it would have fired up 10 of the Blender's slaves and would be in the process of terminating the Maya slaves. So I think that process is in the process of switching over. And we can see that there's a bunch of cloud slaves that have been dynamically spawned up, and they are in the process of crunching away on this job. And if you wanted to, if you were in the middle of a project and your client decided they wanted something faster and was willing to pay for it, then you could essentially increase the budget settings, and the balancer would recognize the change in the budget. And there you can see it's adjusted back down to 10 now. And I think this number up here is actually, I think our active number in this version is a little bit buggy. The actual number rendering would not exceed the budget, but I think the reporting is a bit off here. But in essence, you can see what's happened is that the balancer has gone ahead and spawned up the VMs and has terminated the VMs for the other job. So let's switch back to the slides. All right, so to recap VMX for Deadline, the cloud support is purely additive to your existing farm. There's no changes necessary to your classic render nodes and workstations. You can mix in the cloud stuff with the non-cloud stuff. You can transition over to cloud usage at your own pace so that it's not a big burden. It gives you a chance to experiment and decide the approach that you want to take. You can maybe work with a couple of different cloud providers and see which one you like best. And in order to get past that learning curve, we have the Cloud Wizard now, so you can test out your cloud rendering in your facility, jump on there in typically in less than 30 minutes, and see how it works with very little pain.